Hello, I'm Sir Lorccán. I'm dressed down today instead of in armor because I'm taking it easy on some tendonitis in my shoulder. But I think I have something to talk about that's worth getting out to you instead of waiting. Last video I made, I was talking about commitments and advantages. And in a sense, the trade-offs that we make when we commit to an action, whether we gain an advantage from that action or whether we give one up, and the same thing with our opponents. Today I want to tie that into some historical perspective, particularly based on the works of George Silver, who was an English fencing or swordplay master. Separate discussion. I'm not a great student of Silver, so I do not pretend to be an expert. But there's the concept of the true time and the true place that he brings up, and this, I think, is really useful. In the English language of the time, true and false are important and complicated ideas. This is where we get the true edge and the false edge of the sword. The false edge is a very real edge that will cut, and if you turn the sword around on a double-edged sword, it's just as good as the front edge. There's something wrong with it. The thing about the false edge is it is in relation to your hand. The false edge is the less reliable, less strong, less consistent. It is the opposite number of the true edge, which is in line with your knuckles. That's the one that is more reliable, stronger, more consistent. That is the one that you want as your go-to. You don't want to be without the false edge, and there may be times where you win a fight with the false edge. But the true edge is the one that is the most important, the most valuable. It's the one you really need. Messing around with the false edge can get you in trouble sometimes, especially with sharp swords as opposed to SCA rattan. You get the same sort of values of true and false in Silver's talk of time and places. In his version of things, the true time is boiled down to oversimplify, where you can act most quickly and efficiently. The false time is where you have to take more or slower actions. The way he normally would break it down, as I understand it, is that the time of the hand, meaning the hand is the part of you that's going to move the fastest. The time of the hand is the true time, or anything that leads with the hand. So, for instance, if I start with my hand and I need to move my body and my foot along with it, still arguably time of the hand. If on the other hand, I'm starting with my foot and then moving up my body and into the hand, there's a lot more time spent before I actually get to doing anything that directly threatens my opponent or has the potential to win me that fight. So if I start here and do it, it's pretty easy to see, yeah, there's a real difference there. So Silver defines the true time in terms of when you can, throw your blow using only the time of the hand, not requiring that you move your foot, you do anything else first. Again, as I understand it. There's scholarly debate on this stuff because his English is a little bit outdated these days and is prone to misinterpretation. Yay! Likewise, there's a true place and false place. And we can think of these generally in terms of the true place is where you have the advantage of being able to act fairly quickly and fairly safely, and the false place is where that's not true. We can look a little more specifically at Silver's meaning for this, where the true place is one where you can act in the time of the hand. So, sorry about the overhead. If this is my opponent, if the face, well, we're both in theory where we can probably act just moving the hand. So that could be considered a true place. But I would prefer to think of it in terms of right now we're neither of us really in the best place because we're roughly even. We want to make the odds uneven. If instead, assuming my opponent is a right-handed sword and shield fighter, if I can get over here, where my opponent now has to take a longer, slower action to reach me with most attacks, and I can take a very quick, short action with my opponent covering a line of their own attack at me, making it this much more advantageous to me, much less advantageous to them. To me, that's a truer place. And we could go around in circles about this all day long. And I'm not attempting to be entirely true to Silver's teaching. Just using him as a guidepost for the idea. So please forgive me if I butcher something that you've been studying and working on. But in the SCA fight, or any other sword fight, you want to maximize your safety in whatever you're doing. You can choose to just charge in head first if that's what's fun for you, but that's not the art. The art of swordplay in Silver's time is called the art of defense, and he makes a very big deal out of the importance and primacy of defense in the art, where just about anybody can go out there and swing a sword and draw some blood. That's not that hard if you're willing to ignore your defense in the process. If you actually want to come through it safe and unharmed and alive, you've really got to figure out, okay, first, how do I not get hurt? That's number one. Then number two is, okay, now, how do I continue to not get hurt while I hurt the other guy? And if you let go of that for too long, you'll end up thinking about the fight in the wrong way. In the SCA, where we have nice big shields that are indestructible per our rules, this can cover a whole lot of me. I can do some things that period fencing masters would never consider, because if they're considering some weapons, there are no shields involved, or the shields are small bucklers if they're talking about something to be used in a dueling context, or if they're on the war field, still talking about a world where the shield could be smashed, crushed by one good blow of, say, a poleaxe or a halberd. So it's not the absolute protection that an SCA shield is against our rattan weapons. And if you think in that slightly more conservative mindset about putting your safety first, it will develop a much better balanced fight for you. If you are all offense and no defense, at some point you will hit a wall where that all offense approach is just getting you killed. Where you just can't beat the top level opponents that way, because if they've got a solid defense that allows them to observe and evaluate your offense, they will find the holes in it and kill you. So when you commit to an attack, you want to be sure that you are relatively safe in that attack, that you have cut off your opponent's easiest blows they might throw, or you have distracted or misled them, such as if I get my opponent's attention on my buckler, even if only for a moment, that's a tiny moment where I have the advantage of time, where their perception of what I'm going to do next is slowed down because they are occupied for a moment with that thing coming at their face. And if I am striking down, It's not that they can't see it. It's that they will tend to see it, understand it, and react to it more slowly. And this makes a huge difference in a fight between skilled opponents. The little difference in reaction time between a threat being real and a threat being identified and then being dealt with. If you can manage your commitment so that it stays relatively neutral and keep yourself in a relatively safe place until you are ready to commit to doing something else, something that will take the fight for you, then you're going to be much better off. And we add George Silver's basic idea of true time, true place to this. If I am starting out of my opponent's range and I take a big step into range before beginning my attack, my opponent is more likely to be in the true time than I am. Because if my opponent has been standing there, they're probably at the point where once I have stepped in for them, they've got the true time. One move attack. Bam. This is not to say that you should never ever take that big step in, but if you do, you should recognize the advantage you're giving your opponent in doing so. This is also a reason why more smaller steps can be really good. If I am closing in without that big lunging step that eats up time. If I am closing into range, and now I've gotten where I want to be, and now I can throw the sword and follow it the rest of the way in. That's substantially safer for me. It keeps more of the advantage on my terms. It gives my opponent much less of that window of advantage where they're ready and they're waiting for me and they see what they want and they go, aha, whack. Place and time are closely related for this. If I am in the wrong place, I will need more time. And this could simply be being too far away from my opponent. Can't reach him from here. Gonna take some time to move in. Or it can be simply out of place. I've made a bad commitment in this case if my opponent is there and I'm over here with my weapon down. Now, I can throw something at them from here, but I'm gonna pay for it in time because I've got to shift my body, shift my defense, throw. And if I don't do that one fairly direct thing, anything else I do from here is going to be fairly slow. If I want to stab them, no. Well, okay, I can stab them like that, but now I've taken all the time and energy to back out, reset, throw. Can I throw a forehand from here? No, it's going to take that, going back over my shoulder like that. Again, reset, throw. That's very much a false place when I'm off there. And as a fight develops, you want to be moving ideally from safe, but safely out of range into true place, and from one true place to another as the fight develops, as your opponent reacts. Where the right place to be is going to change as you move, as you shift your momentum, as you shift your attack and defense. The true place isn't one specific location. It's wherever you have that advantage of being able to strike quickly from safety. At least, this is the way I use the term. Please let me know if any of that is unclear. Next up, my lovely wife will be helping with some demonstrations of these ideas.